They believed she was simply another bereaved widow at the Ironwood Café, a simple prey for the growth of the Iron Hand Motorcycle Club. They were unaware that Margaret Ellison had been doing more than simply writing in her journal that morning. She was carrying on the tradition of one of America's most decorated Navy SEALs, Commander Jonathan Ellison. They sparked a war with a brotherhood of warriors who had been waiting 3 years to reveal their criminal empire, not just a spat with a widow, when they threatened her husband's favorite cafe and made fun of his folded flag. The Iron Hand MC would discover by nightfall that the quiet individual with nothing left to lose is sometimes the most dangerous person in the room. Let's have a little rest. Please let us know where you are tuning in. Remember to subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, since tomorrow's story will be something very exceptional. Margaret Ellison's corner seat was bathed in a golden glow as the morning sun cast long shadows across the Ironwood Café's aging linoleum floor. Her fingertips followed the margins of a leather-bound journal that contained the exact handwriting of her late husband on its pages. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee permeated the air, mingling with the sounds of plates clinking and soft talk that had accompanied so many of her life's events. The diner's seasoned waitress, Martha, came up carrying a hot pot of coffee. The weight of numerous mornings spent seeing Margaret sit in the same booth where Will had first asked her to dance 27 years prior was evident in her eyes. Margaret as usual? She knew the answer before she asked. Margaret forced a tiny smile that fell short of her steel-gray eyes. Regards, Martha. Today, only half a cup. Her eyes strayed to the triangular flag display case next to her, which was filled with more than just neatly folded cloth. It held memories, promises, and a power that few knew. The morning silence broke as the bell above the diner's door sounded. 3 men stepped in, their leather jackets emblazoned with the Iron Hand MC's recognizable skull and chains emblem, heavy boots scraping the floor. Like a predator assessing its prey, the lead writer, a massive man with storms sewn on his vest, scanned the diner. Raven and Blaze dispersed behind him, their moves rehearsed and menacing. Martha gripped the coffee pot tighter. "Margaret," she said softly. "Perhaps you ought to." "Don't worry, Martha." The calmness in Margaret's voice seemed to contrast with the stress in the room. This diner was worth defending, Will always claimed. Her thoughts strayed to that final hospital talk, which had taken place 3 years prior yet was still as vivid in her mind as shards of glass. The diner's normal morning calm was broken by the bikers' boisterous chatter and obscene jokes as they took up residence in a booth next to the counter. In an attempt to blend in, several patrons crouched over their dishes. The Iron Hand MC had already established its presence in Ridge Creek before the requests for protection money started, so this scene had become recognizable. The diner echoed with Storm's voice. "Nice location. It would be a shame if it were to die." His laugh was devoid of genuine humor. "There have been a lot of business accidents recently. Electrical issues. Damaged windows. That kind of thing." The journal remained motionless in Margaret's grasp. There was more than Will's writings in its pages. It included names, dates, and proof. The kind of information that might destroy the MC's well-built empire. Will had devoted his final years to compiling it, figuring out the links between the Iron Hand MC and a network of corruption that extended to the local police department. Margaret grabbed Martha's wrist as she attempted to confront the bikers. "Not yet," she muttered. "Everything has its time." She was aware of what was going to happen. Local companies had been routinely taken over by the Iron Hand MC, who used them as fronts for their operations. In nearby counties, they had already taken 3 diners. They were unaware that the silent widow at the booth in the corner had been anticipating their arrival. The Iron Hand MC believed they were merely extending their territory, but behind her meticulously constructed mask of sadness were years of training, a network of devoted warriors, and a promise given to a dying man. Rather, they had just fallen into a well-planned trap that would reveal their whole scheme. Margaret sent a single text as she opened her phone. "They're present." The culmination of 3 years of preparation, evidence collection, and case building against the malfeasance that had cost Will his life was imminent. She had to do her part first, though. They would seriously undervalue the woman, the bereaved widow, and the easy victim. Storm moved toward her booth, casting his shadow on the flag display case. "Isn't that a military issue?" He scoffed. "My husband was a soldier, I suppose." Margaret raised her head and met his intense, silent gaze. She corrected quietly, "Navy SEAL. Jonathan Ellison, Commander." "Was." Storm grinned more broadly. "It's not that convenient, is it? I suppose he is no longer there to defend his favorite diner." Will's journal's spine was touched by Margaret's fingers. "Some things protect themselves," she added cautiously. Margaret's hand moved very quickly, slipping the flag display case out of Storm's hold as his fingers grabbed for it. Though few would acknowledge it as such, the motion was fluid, well-practiced, and spoke of years of training. "Don't." There was quiet assurance in the one word, but no danger. She may have been scared 3 years ago, but it was a long time to get ready, to recall all that Will had taught her about dealing with guys who mistakenly thought that intimidation was strength. Deputy Sheriff Wilson entered, his uniform pressed but his eyes suspicious, as the diner's door chimed once again. Another piece of evidence that fits the riddle Will died trying to solve was the modest nod he gave Storm, which Margaret observed. "Is everything all right here?" Wilson inquired in a tone that made it obvious he wasn't particularly interested in the response. Storm responded, just getting acquainted with the local businesses, keeping his gaze fixed on Margaret to ensure that everyone was aware of how things operate in Ridge Creek these days. Frank Henderson, his old face wrinkled with worry, lowered his newspaper from his usual booth near the window. One of the few people who truly understood the cause of the SEAL commander's accident in Afghanistan was the old store owner, who had been Will's friend for 20 years. Frank's words carried the weight of someone who had witnessed too much to be silent, yet it seems to me that everything is working just the way it is. They were still establishing their territory and weren't eager to make a scene just yet, so Storm held out a hand when Raven and Stryker approached Frank's booth. One of Margaret's final chats with Will in the hospital came back to her. Storm's voice was brimming with sarcastic pity. "Your husband was a hero. Don't be embarrassed to ruin his memories with any bad things that happened." Martha arrived with a fresh pot of coffee before Margaret could reply. Her voice was firm, but her hand shook a little as she filled Margaret's cup. "Have you guys stopped bothering my customers? Because right here is Deputy Carlton's number." She gave her apron pocket a heartfelt pat. The fact that Carlton was not on their payroll and that he was one of the few clean cops remaining in Ridge Creek made Storm's jaw tighten. Still. A dark vehicle came into the parking lot outside the window of the diner. Margaret saw the familiar face of Richard Patterson through the glass. He did not recognize her. This was a long-term plan. The Iron Hand MC must have felt alone and exposed. It made what they would do next predictable. Storm declared that he was just leaving, but his eyes told him that this was not the end. "Consider what we talked about. I would hate to see something happen to a place as old as this." Margaret opened Will's journal once more as the motorcyclists departed, adding another notation to their surveillance log. Timetables, names, and the nuanced exchange with Wilson. When constructing a RICO case, every detail was crucial. Frank walked up to her booth and positioned his large body across from her. "They're becoming more daring," he whispered. "In the last month, 3 diners. The Silver Spoon in Carter's Creek, followed by Joey's Place in Millbrook. They're here now." Margaret said quietly, "They need the diners. Profitable companies in prime locations that are ideal for their actual operations." With her coffee pot still in her hand like a weapon, Martha joined them. "I recall their initial appearance 2 years ago. They said they were just passing through. Look at them now, behaving as though they control the entire county." Under its gentle exterior, Margaret's voice had steel. "They don't own anything yet. We have everything we need to stop them thanks to Will. All we need to do is wait. She watched Storm and his men get on their bikes through the window. Behind them, Deputy Wilson's patrol car pulled out. Another thread in the web they were weaving, another piece of proof. Frank lowered his voice. So Rick's in charge. Margaret gave a small nod. Weeks have passed. Next on their list is Henderson's General Store. They have a pattern. Go to the closest store after the diner. Make use of both as points of distribution. Give it a shot. Frank balled his grizzled hands into fists. A few surprises are in store for you. Margaret touched his arm instead. We play this cleverly. This case will take 3 years to develop. The book is responsible for everything. It must remain when we remove them. They were comparatively alone in the diner as the morning crowd began to dwindle away. They could hear Tom, Martha's husband, humming the same Navy song he had sung at Will's burial while he worked on the grill through the kitchen door. Unnecessarily, Frank warned that they would return. Margaret's hand strayed to the case with the flag display. I'm hoping for it. The following time, however, they will discover more than an elderly guy and a widow. Storm rolled across the valley outside. Ridge Creek was about to experience a storm, but it wasn't the type of storm that weather forecasts predict. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining. It is really important to us. Let's return to the narrative. They believed they were extending their area, according to the Iron Hand MC, rather, they were riding directly into a trap that had been developing for 3 years. It buzzed on Margaret's phone. Rick sent a message. The package was delivered. She would discover a manila envelope hidden beneath the loose block in her garden wall on her way home. More proof. More relationships. Additional pieces of the puzzle Will had lost his life attempting to solve. As Frank watched the motorcycles vanish around the bend, he thought, they haven't even asked themselves the crucial question because they are too preoccupied with trying to scare us. What is it? Why did a Navy SEAL leader operate a counter-surveillance operation out of a small-town cafe during his final years? Frank's gaze glowed. Or why his widow continues to come here each morning, writing in her journal as if she were simply coping with her loss. Margaret smiled a little to herself. It's preferable not to ask some questions. For a little while longer, however. According to her, Martha came back to replenish their glasses, moving in a purposefully informal manner. Wilson is passing again. It's the 3rd time this morning. Good, Margaret muttered. Give them the impression that they are observing us. Tyler. Poison. Through his side mirror, Reed observed Margaret Ellison while seated in his pickup truck across from the Blue Ridge Café. He was the only member of the Iron Hand MC who recalled Commander Ellison from the time the SEAL had assisted Tyler's older brother during his most severe PTSD episodes, and he was the youngest at 25. It crackled on his radio. All eyes on the target. There was impatience in Storm's voice. Yes, Tyler said, the military jargon slipping out of his mouth involuntarily, a holdover from the life he had nearly chosen before the MC recruited him. She's going to meet someone. Older man. Military demeanor. He observed in his mirror as Margaret greeted Richard Patterson in the parking lot of the diner. Their exchange appeared informal. Just 2 individuals who may have known one another from social gatherings or religion. However, Tyler observed the nuanced hand signals and the honed manner in which they remained cognizant of their surroundings. Marcus Reaper Kingston looked at the surveillance photos strewn on his desk in the Iron Hand clubhouse across town. The president of the MC had started from scratch and turned a small biker gang into a highly organized criminal organization. Seeing images of Margaret Ellison now made him uneasy in a way he had never experienced before. He whispered to Storm, who was standing at attention close by, something about her doesn't add up. 3 years. She is always at that diner in the mornings. Writing in that journal all the time. Never stops observing. Do you want a more powerful message from us? Storm gave a deep knuckle crack. We cannot allow one widow to impede our growth. No. The authority that had made Reaper a household name in 3 states was evident in his voice. More can be found here. Her spouse wasn't your average SEAL. He was a counterintelligence officer with a focus on tracking the trafficking of weapons. He was looking into missing supplies from military bases before to his accident. Back in the cafe, Rick and Margaret sat in her usual booth, the country music on the radio and the clatter of dishes drowning out their discussion. They're traveling more quickly than we thought. Rick stirred his coffee and spoke softly. Every month, 3 restaurants are located close to important transportation routes. They are preparing for a major event. A napkin with numbers scribbled in Will's characteristic hand was handed across the table by Margaret. Manifests for shipping. We will trace these containers from Afghanistan, weapons purportedly destroyed in conflict, and weapons that vanished from forward operating bases. And they're coming here immediately. Rick's mouth clenched. Concealing themselves in plain sight by using MC-controlled companies as distribution centers, spotless cars, and authentic documentation. Through the window, they observed Tyler continuing his surveillance while feigning to check his phone. Margaret's face grew a little softer. He is not like the others. Relatives in the military. Will and brother served in Kandahar. Could be helpful, Rick said. In the event that he is unsure. We have not yet moved on from him. Margaret warned. Everything must take place in the correct sequence. This was meticulously prepared by Will. Deputy Wilson squawked normal patrol updates on his radio while he sat at the counter, drinking his 3rd cup of coffee. He appeared to onlookers to be just another police officer enjoying a break. But Margaret noticed that when certain names crackled over the radio, his head dipped slightly. How his hand tapped his phone occasionally with coded answers. Frank Henderson arrived on time, and the door to the diner chimed. Following the routines they had developed over the previous 3 years, he took his customary booth and placed his normal breakfast order. The Iron Hand MC saw just what they had anticipated because to patterns. Only people from tiny towns lead small town lives. Rick's phone shook. Kingston is moving. Going to meet with his suppliers in the state capital. Excellent. Margaret looked at her watch. That provides us with the necessary window. Martha. With the coffee pot in hand, the waitress came over. Today, the manager called in ill. His shift is being covered by me. Her informal demeanor concealed the importance. Instead of the usual stream, the diner security cameras would be operating on their system today. Tyler's radio crackled outside once more. Target is still in business. He paused, recalling the funeral of Commander Ellison. How he had donned his dress blues and stood at attention as Margaret took the folded flag. Prior to the MC, prior to things going bad. Finally, he answered, yes. It appears to be just 2 elderly buddies enjoying coffee. Reaper looked at another picture in the clubhouse. 3 months ago, Margaret was pictured at Arlington National Cemetery. He wasn't interested in her monthly visits to Will's cemetery, though. A senior military official who had just authorized shipping routes across their region was the figure in the background. Sir. His thoughts were disturbed by Storm. We should think about postponing the weapons shipment, according on Wilson's reporting of heightened federal activity in the region. Reaper struck his desk with his fist. Nothing is being postponed. We have been using these routes and building this network for 3 years. Now, neither a widow nor a Fed will stop us. An encrypted message from Rick's team buzzed through Margaret's phone. There was more activity at the MC's secondary outposts, according to satellite images. As Will had foreseen in his last reports, they were getting ready for something big. Rick said they'll be moving soon. Once they start producing those weapons. Let them, Margaret said with a tone of unwavering assurance. Everything is set up. As Will had intended. They provide more proof the harder they push. She observed Tyler's struggle with his conscience through the glass, as his fingers fretted over the dog tags concealed beneath his vest and his brother's tags, which served as a reminder of the wrong road. 3 years, thought Rick. The best trap is sometimes the one they are unaware they are entering. Feeling the concealed compartment where Will's last piece of evidence was kept, Margaret touched the flag display case. She whispered that they believed they had murdered a seal. Rather, they initiated a conflict. 5 Iron Hand motorcycles stormed into position around the entrance of the Ironwood Café, while the afternoon sun threw sharp shadows across the parking lot. Through the window, Margaret saw Reaper disembark first, drawing attention to himself right once. Raven positioned himself close to the door, while Blaze and Storm stood on either side of him. Even under his leather vest, Tyler's pain was evident as he hung back. Martha's hand trembled a little inside as she poured coffee for the few patrons who were still there. While his worn hands reached under the table, where Margaret knew he had installed a panic button that was immediately connected to Rick's monitoring team, Frank Henderson stayed in his booth and pretended to read his newspaper. Entering with the power that came from years of making people vanish, Reaper commanded, "Clear the place." With the exception of Frank, who turned his page slowly and purposefully, the other patrons hastily packed their stuff and left cash on their tables before hurrying out. Storm snarled, "That includes you, old man." Frank raised his head, the steel in his eyes that Margaret had noticed in Will's. "While you were still playing with toy motorcycles, son, I was conducting operations. When I'm all set, I'll depart." With caution, Margaret closed Will's journal, her fingers resting on the final entry he had typed. Coordinates for 3 states' worth of weapon caches, each with military accuracy. She had committed all of them to memory, as well as the proof that connected each place to dishonest law enforcement personnel. Reaper faced Margaret and straddled a chair that he dragged up. The Fated Force Recon tattoo, which he had attempted to conceal with the MC symbol, was visible to her up close. "Ellison, Mrs." There was a false warmth in his voice. "I believe it's time for us to have a meaningful discussion about this establishment's future." Margaret responded quietly but firmly that the diner was not for sale. "It won't be. Choice is implied by sale." Reaper's eyes did not meet his smile. "I'm providing accident insurance and protection. In Ridge Creek, things are evolving." Tom, Martha's husband, observed the action via the kitchen window. 3 years ago, they had concealed the shotgun behind the grill, and his hand was close to it. Margaret shook his head subtly. "Not quite yet. Everything needed to go as planned." "Interesting timing," Margaret said, observing Tyler's uneasy shift close to the entrance. "This place must be of special importance to your company just before the next shipment arrives." Reaper stopped smiling. Blaze and Storm looked at each other anxiously behind him. The shipments were not meant to be known to her. "Keep it in mind, Mrs. Ellison. Your husband was murdered because you asked the wrong questions. Did you do it?" Margaret's tone did not waver. "Or did he discover just what he sought?" Deliberately slow, Deputy Wilson's patrol cruiser rolled past outside. Through the window, Margaret saw Rick's surveillance van, which was posing as a phone repair shop and recording the entire altercation. Margaret went on, 3 diners in 3 counties. Each one is close to a busy transportation corridor. Each is ideal for transporting particular kinds of goods covertly. You worked it out before you killed him, though. Isn't that why he picked this location? For what he could see from that corner booth, not for the coffee. Her wrist was grabbed by Reaper's outstretched hand. "You don't know what you're discussing." Margaret didn't pull away or fight. The calm intensity that had made Will famed among his SEAL teams was instead reflected in her eyes. Weapons supplies from 7 forward operating locations in Afghanistan have gone missing. They were all supposedly destroyed in battle. Through your network, each one is in some manner returning to American territory. Do you want me to continue? Setting his newspaper aside, Frank could hear the rustle of the Ranger tab tattooed on his forearm. Son, be careful with the woman's arm. Some of us can still recall how to handle those who treat Gold Star families disrespectfully. Reaper let go of Margaret's wrist, but his eyes were no longer confident as predators. Mrs. Ellison, you have a lot of creativity, but making irrational allegations could be harmful. Mishaps occur. Like my husband's death in the accident. Margaret took out one picture from the flag display cabinet. Or the accident that was just waiting to happen at your Cedar Grove warehouse. The one where you're stockpiling enough weapons to launch a minor conflict. What Margaret already knew was reinforced by Tyler's sudden intake of breath. The extent to which things had progressed did not sit well with everyone in the MC. The scope of Reaper's business had expanded beyond straightforward protection and drug trafficking schemes. By moving firearms across state boundaries under the guise of legitimate business ventures, they were arming domestic terrorist cells. Reaper stood, towering above her booth. You have a decision to make. Get out of here. Go somewhere else with your wacky theories and your memories. Or go to Arlington with your husband. Margaret carefully put the picture back where it belonged. It's funny about SEALs, she remarked quietly. They make plans for everything. Will made the right decision in selecting this diner. When he collected his proof, he ensured that specific individuals would be observing at specific times. Rick gave her a subtle hand signal, which she saw through the window. They were filming everything. Each word strengthens their argument. Reaper might be in charge of the local police force, but he hadn't taken into account the experienced network Will had established prior to his passing. Final opportunity. Reaper lowered his voice to a perilous murmur. Don't force me to find a lasting solution. Margaret's smile was resolute despite its sadness. With Will, you've already tried that. How did you find that to be? Margaret saw Tyler hanging back as the Iron Hand MC guys got on their bikes. For a moment, his gaze touched hers. She witnessed the identical battle Will had described in his sibling at that same time. A fine man who was misguided. Seeking a means of returning to honor. Isn't it just getting started? After they had left, Frank inquired. In the distance, the sound of motorcycles rumbling fades. Will's last piece of evidence was kept in a secret compartment in the flag case, which Margaret touched. No, she said quietly. 3 years ago was when it began. They simply aren't aware of it yet. Margaret's breath formed little clouds in the dark as she strolled through the empty streets of Ridge Creek in the very cold midnight air. An hour ago, the windows of the diner had been broken. Through the glass, 3 bricks. An admonition of what lay ahead. Before completing his report, Deputy Wilson had taken his time in responding, ensuring that the offenders had long since left. Tyler Venom Reed was waiting in the alleyway behind Henderson's store, and she wasn't shocked to see him. He was noticeably missing his MC vest, wearing a battered military jacket that had once belonged to his brother. Without introducing himself, he declared, "They're going to hit the diner again tomorrow. A worse thing than smashed windows. Reapers are terrified. He's never looked like this to me." Margaret noticed resemblances to the young man's brother Michael when she examined his features. Will used to argue that anxiety makes people sloppy and predictable. You were aware. Tyler's voice broke a bit. What about Mike? About Will assisting him? Reaching into her bag, Margaret took out a picture. It featured Will and Michael Reed standing next to a helicopter in Afghanistan while fully outfitted for battle. One of the best was your brother. Mike was the best at handling a rifle, according to Will. As Tyler took the picture, his hands shook. You know, he was improving from the nightmares and PTSD. He was working it out with Will's help. Then, shortly after Mike began to inquire about missing shipments of weapons, the accident occurred at the base. From an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, Rick Patterson's surveillance crew kept an eye on Iron Hand radio activity. The package arrived earlier than expected. He addressed Margaret over a secure connection. The timeline is being advanced. They were uneasy about something. Tyler looked anxiously over his shoulder back in the alley. Reapers summoned other chapters to provide reinforcements. It's going to be big, whatever it is. Greater beyond anything we have ever done. What is the number of weapons? Quietly, Margaret inquired. A small army may be outfitted with it. But this time, it's not just guns. They have anti-tank weapons, military-grade explosives, and communication equipment. They no longer only provide local troublemakers. This is not the same thing. The entrance to the alley was rolled past by a police car. Behind the wheel, Wilson's recognizable silhouette. Tyler and Margaret pushed farther into the darkness until it was gone. You're telling me this, but why? In the low light, Margaret examined Tyler's face. Since Mike wouldn't understand what we've turned into. Years of suppressed shame were in Tyler's voice. Our goal was to assist veterans by providing them with a sense of purpose and fraternity. We're arming the exact folks we used to combat instead. It vibrated on Margaret's phone. Martha sent a message. Storm and Raven had been scouting the building's back door with the diner's hidden cameras, preparing their next intimidation move. Tyler added that Reaper wasn't always like this. He was a seasoned combat veteran and a force recon. Following his most recent deployment, something changed. Began discussing how we needed to take issues into our own hands since the system was rigged. When did the trafficking of firearms start? Commander Ellison began frequenting the diner every morning approximately 3 years ago. Suddenly, Tyler's eyes grew wide with comprehension. Did he not know? He picked that particular spot for that reason. Slowly, Margaret nodded. The diner is situated where 3 important transportation routes converge. Ideal location for tracking patterns and keeping an eye on vehicle movements. Before they realized what they were doing, we'll map their operation for months. Rick's words crackled over Margaret's hidden earpiece from his observation position. There are several cars coming into town. 3 distinct chapters worth of MC colors. They have no plans to wait till tomorrow. Motorcycles rumbled in the distance, and Tyler heard it. I should leave. I'll be at the clubhouse when they expect me. Margaret grabbed his arm and waited. A note detailing everything we found was left for your brother. Prior to the accident, Mike was supposed to assist in exposing the weapons ring. Mike's name is cleared by the evidence and the letters in a secure location. Tyler's face grew stern with determination. What am I supposed to do for you? Just watch for now. Keep in mind which members are unsure and who might be willing to go an alternative route. They will require leaders who understand the value of honor when the time comes. Margaret headed to Henderson's store while Tyler vanished into the night. Inside, Frank was waiting. An operations center was created in the store's basement. One wall was covered by Rick's surveillance feeds, which showed members of Iron Hand swarming Ridge Creek from all sides. Yes, they are frightened. As Will had feared, Frank examined the monitors, advancing up their chronology and becoming careless. A page of tactical notes appeared in Will's journal when Margaret opened it. They become predictable and vulnerable due to fear. They'll attempt to set the diner on fire tonight, you know. Frank's voice was worried. Wilson has ensured that no police units will show up. Give it a shot. There was no warmth in Margaret's smile. Everything went according to Will's plan. The remainder of the diner's real patrons were quietly escorted out the back door by Martha and Tom across town. For 3 years, the old couple had been the unassuming diner employees who kept their heads down and didn't miss anything. Ridge Creek held its breath until midnight. The Iron Hand MC believed they were removing a threat and sending a message. Rather, They were entering a trap that had been planned for 3 years by a SEAL commander who had anticipated their defection. Before leaving for home, Margaret gave the flag display case one final touch. There was enough proof within, concealed beneath layers of meticulously folded fabric, to dismantle not only the M6's operation but the entire crooked network they had established. Will's widow was prepared to perform her role as his last mission approached its conclusion. The dark stillness of Ridge Creek was broken by the heavy roar of motorcycles. As they got closer to the Ironwood Café, Storm took the lead, with Raven and Blaze at his sides. 6 horsemen from nearby chapters trailed behind them, their leather jackets emblazoned with the Iron Hand emblem. With his flashlight shining on the now empty parking lot, Tyler hung back. Margaret sat quietly at her customary booth in the dimly lit diner. While Frank Henderson kept watch from the security room of his business, working with Rick's surveillance crew, Martha and Tom had moved into the kitchen. There are several targets coming from the north. Margaret's hidden earphone let Rick's voice in. Wilson's patrols are staying away from the area. For the next half hour, you are on your own. As planned, Storm's boot crashed through what was left of the front window as Margaret touched the flag display case next to her. As additional MC members entered after him, the sound of shattered glass reverberated throughout the deserted cafe. Margaret sat peacefully in the glow of his flashlight. In front of her, Will's journal opened. You ought to have accepted the offer. There was a false regret in Storm's voice. We now take the difficult route. Margaret saw Tyler standing close to the door, quietly obstructing the easiest way out. She heard Frank confirm that all the cameras were filming through her earpiece. Every move and every word would be recorded. An intriguing decision. Margaret watched coolly. Attacking the company of a Gold Star family? Your seasoned supporters will not like that. Quit talking. Taking a can of gas out of his saddlebag, Raven growled. It's time to make a statement about Ridge Creek's new order. Raven started spraying the counter, and the air was heavy with the stench of gasoline. Margaret was still sitting there, observing them with the same silent ferocity that had made Reaper uneasy before. Storm came toward her booth, his huge body a shadow in the low light. One last chance to leave, he said. A fire is ready to break out. If you were caught in it, feel embarrassed. Margaret had a dejected but resolute smile. The most crucial aspect of ambush planning, according to Will, is ensuring that your target is totally committed to the attack. The lights in the diner flashed to life, and Storm's look changed from one of assurance to one of bewilderment. The MC members were caught in glaring white light as the parking area was lighted by strong floodlights outside. Martha and Tom came out of the kitchen in tactical vests, their moves demonstrating years of military experience. What on earth? Tyler was in the way when Stryker retreated toward the door. Margaret calmly went on, the second rule of ambush. Manage the exits. Storm's attention was drawn to the sound of cars coming. He could see 3 unmarked vans parked surrounding the diner via the windows. Rick Patterson emerged out the first one with a group of individuals whose faces shouted, "Federal agent." Storm snarled and reached for Margaret, saying, "You set us up." His hand failed to make it. He fell to the ground after being struck in the back by Tom's taser. Raven was protected by Martha, and Tyler stopped the others from running away. This is how a real trap looks, Margaret said, standing with purposeful motions. Every second was captured. Every activity is recorded. In order to ensure that you would provide us with everything we required when you eventually proceeded against the diner, we will spend 3 years organizing this. Wilson had seen the operation and was on her way with support, according to Frank, who was reporting over her earpiece. You don't know what you did. Raven vomited on the ground. Reaper already knows when he learns. Rick went into the diner while his group secured the members of the MC. Your president is currently dealing with his own issues. When federal agencies eventually obtain proof of weapons trafficking through ostensibly respectable companies, it's amazing what follows. The thorough surveillance notes, shipping manifests, and link maps that Will had spent years gathering were visible when Margaret opened his journal. There was always more to hear than a diner. Will was aware that you would eventually need to take action against it and that you would require it as a distribution point once the shipments of weapons increased. Storm, in spite of his predicament, laughed. Do you believe that this makes a difference? We own the police and this town. None of this will matter in the morning. We're not using local law enforcement because of this. Rick grinned icily. It turns out that exporting stolen military hardware through motorcycle clubs is a violation of Executive Order 13773, which targets transnational criminal organizations. Wilson's patrol car pulled up outside. When the deputy recognized the federal agents, his expression dimmed. He reached for his radio, but Frank's voice stopped him in his tracks. I wouldn't. With his ranger training clearly visible in his stance, the elderly store owner emerged from the shadows. Unless you wish to tell Treasury agents about those deposits. Catherine observed Rick's crew gathering evidence, taking pictures of the gas cans, noting the vehicle numbers, and recording everything. As Storm and his men were escorted to the vans that were waiting, their faces revealed the growing recognition that they had entered a much more complex situation than a straightforward intimidation job. Catherine whispered to Tyler, your brother would be proud. Choosing honor over loyalty can be the most difficult thing to do at times. After taking off his iron hand vest, Tyler nodded. Didn't Mike try to stop this? Prior to the mishap. Catherine confirmed that he was working with Will. They nearly made the entire thing public. Because of this, we had to wait and give them the impression that they had triumphed before we could complete the task they had begun. Catherine gave the flag display case a final touch as the vans pulled away, their detainees in tow. The Iron Hand MC would be shaken by what happened that night. Naturally, Reaper would strike back. It was usually men like him. However, the real operation could now start since the trap had been set and the proof had been secured. Will would have loved this, Frank remarked quietly as he watched federal officers take pictures of the scene, using their own strategy against them and giving the impression that they were in control until the trap closed. Rick's message chimed on Catherine's phone. Phase 1 is finished, we're waiting on Reaper's reply. Jonathan Ellison was prepared for the next round of the Ridge Creek conflict. This was the culmination of 3 years of patience and portraying the bereaved widow. It was now time to reveal to the Iron Hand MC why Will had decided to perform his final and most significant operation in this particular town and cafe. Dozens of motorcyclists stormed into town as dawn bathed the streets of Ridge Creek in shades of gray. Under his helmet, Reaper's face was etched in stone, and he personally led the column. Members from 5 other chapters rode after him, their leather jackets bearing patches from 3 different states. The Iron Hand MC had finished playing games, and the message was obvious. As the bikers divided into groups and positioned themselves around strategic junctions, Catherine observed from the security room of Henderson's business. Their whole trafficking network was at risk, not just their local enterprise, when the night's federal operation hit a nerve. Frank counted 37 motorcycles, adding support vehicles and marking locations on their tactical map. They are establishing checkpoints and regulating traffic entering and leaving the city. Their secure line cracked with Rick's voice. Despite not speaking, Storm and Raven remain in government detention. Reaper has asked unscrupulous officials for every favor he has. Pressure to free them is increasing. Catherine observed Deputy Wilson working with MC members to set up their barricade via the storefront window. The flimsy facade of law and order was dissolving, exposing Ridge Creek's actual power structure. Tyler joined them in the security room and said, "They hit my house last night. There were new bruises on his face. Reaper is aware that I assisted you. He has commanded everyone to demonstrate their allegiance." Catherine revealed a page she had never previously shared from Will's journal. We were forced to wait because of this. Will was aware that eliminating a few soldiers would not suffice. We required them to display their whole operation, including every corrupted official and dishonest police officer. The page included comprehensive information regarding shell firms, offshore accounts, and a convoluted network of reputable companies that were used to conceal the trafficking of weapons. Tyler gasped when he saw the name at the center. The same officer who rejected the inquiry into his brother's death was General Marcus Stanford. It extends to the very top. There was no surprise in Frank's aged face. In Afghanistan, Will discovered the solution. The weapons were not simply vanishing. They were being shipped home via official routes, purposefully misplaced. There were more motorcycles outside. Catherine recognized patches from the Road Warriors M6 and Iron Legion, two hostile groups now working together to combat a shared enemy. Reaper was rallying an army of criminals by calling in each marker. Rick said Martha just checked in. Men were observing the diner, according to Reapers. The actual documents were never there, but they have stripped it in search of proof. Feeling the concealed compartment where Will's most damning evidence was kept, Catherine touched the flag display case. They have yet to comprehend. It was never about the records at the diner. The goal was to force them to display their whole network. Other MC members' encrypted messages buzzed on Tyler's phone. Shipments of weapons have increased. Arriving now rather than the following week. Scared, Reapers wants to get rid of the whole stockpile. Excellent. There was no warmth in Catherine's smile. As Will had foreseen. If you put enough pressure on them, they'll attempt to move everything at once. Their monitors displayed satellite imagery that Frank had retrieved. 3 semi-trucks are arriving from Canada under the guise of respectable shipping firms. Reapers got police escorts arranged all the way to the state line. Not just police, Tyler added grimly. Military convoys providing additional cover. General Stanford's making sure nothing interrupts this shipment. Through the store window, they watched Reaper dismount his bike outside the diner. His face showed the strain of command of knowing his carefully built empire was threatened by a widow and her late husband's planning. He'll come for you next. Frank warned Catherine. Man like that, losing control. He'll make it personal. It already is personal. Catherine's voice carried steel. Has been since they murdered Will. Everything since then has just been giving them enough rope to hang themselves. Rick's team reported increased chatter on MC frequencies. Reaper was calling a meeting of all chapter presidents. Something that hadn't happened in years. The show of force in Ridge Creek wasn't just about intimidation. It was about proving he could still control the situation. Your brother kept a record too. Catherine told Tyler. Passing him a thumb drive. Will helped him document everything. The missing weapons. The corrupt officers. The accidents that kept happening to investigators. It's all here. Including proof that his death wasn't suicide. Tyler's hands trembled as he took the drive. Why show me this now? Because tonight's not just about stopping a weapons shipment. Catherine checked her watch. It's about justice. For Will. For your brother. For everyone they've killed. To keep their operation running. From the street they heard Reaper's voice carrying orders to his men. The MC leader was organizing search parties. Determined to find whatever evidence Catherine might have hidden. His composure was cracking. Showing the desperate man beneath the hardened exterior. They're searching every building on Main Street. Frank reported. Watching through their security feeds. Getting sloppy. Visible. Stanford's carefully constructed plan shattered by Will Ellison's years of preparation. Target moving north on Cedar Road. Rick tracked the MC leader through their surveillance network. He's heading for the secondary weapons cache. Catherine studied Will's tactical map, seeing the route Reaper had chosen. He's predictable when he's scared, just like Will said he'd be. Through their command center feeds, they watched the federal task force securing the convoy. Stanford stood surrounded by agents. His general stars a stark contrast to the handcuffs at his wrists. The corruption he'd hidden behind military authority was finally exposed. Multiple MC chapters surrendering, Tyler reported from his position. Veteran members are standing down, helping us identify the hardcore loyalists. But we've got a problem. Some of Reaper's inner circle are trying to reach the armory. Frank's satellite imagery showed scattered firefights across town as Iron Hand's remaining loyalists fought desperately. But they were fractured, disorganized, their carefully built network of corruption crumbling around them. Martha reports movement at the diner. Rick's voice carried urgency. Wilson's replacement is coordinating with honest officers securing evidence of police corruption. They found documents in Wilson's cruiser, linking him directly to Stanford. Catherine touched the flag display case, remembering Will's words about patience, about letting enemies destroy themselves through their own desperation. Reaper's not running away, she realized. He's heading for the evidence. The bunker, Tyler understood immediately. Underground storage facility near the old factory. That's where they kept the real records. Blackmail material on corrupt officials, proof of Stanford's involvement. Through their tactical feeds, they watched Reaper abandon his motorcycle, switching to a hidden truck positioned exactly where Will had predicted he'd need it. The MC leader had spent years building escape routes, never realizing they were all compromised. All units, Catherine commanded, converge on the factory district. Reaper's leading us to everything we need. When practice was lacking, Frank's seasoned squads shifted and took up blocking positions across the manufacturing complex. Tyler received vital information about secret entrances and security measures from his reformed MC comrades. It's Stanford speaking. Rick provided updates from the convoy location. In an attempt to reach an agreement, Reaper claims to have material that could jeopardize a national security. Naturally, he does. Catherine had a chilly smile. Will saw to it. Each weapon they transported, each official they bought off. All of it points to that bunker. The roar of helicopters as federal tactical troops gathered on the facility filled the night air. But Reaper had arrived at the entrance to the bunker, vanishing into the subterranean complex he had constructed beneath the deserted industrial core of Ridge Creek. Be careful, Tyler cautioned. The location is explosives rigged. Reaper prefers to destroy everything rather than allow it to be used against him. Catherine disclosed pages in Will's journal that she had never seen before. She said that Will had planted the bombs 3 years prior. Eventually, he knew, they would try to destroy the proof. The bunker was rigged by your husband? Frank's tone was one of appreciation. Will realized that individuals like Stanford and Reaper knew they would need a backup plan, a mechanism to wipe everything down in the event that they were discovered. Thus, he fulfilled their desires exactly. Explosives that appear to wipe up their records. Through the camera network, they observed Reaper entering the main room of the bunker and entering his security codes. Filing cabinet rows had years of illegal activity, meticulously recorded and maintained. He's trying to start some sort of deletion protocol by accessing the main computer, Rick said, keeping an eye on the bunker's power usage. Catherine gave a nod, and everything went as Will had anticipated. Give him permission. A backup of those files was made years ago. Getting him to divulge where the actual weapons cache is located is what counts. Several cars are coming from the south. Frank forewarned. It appears that the personal security detail for Reaper has finally caught up. These people are the ardent believers and the experts. Their radios crackled with Tyler's voice. My folks are in their places. All of the entrances are covered, and the bunker is surrounded. However, these men are not going to give up lightly. While Reaper's supporters fought government squads, muzzle flashes flickered across the night sky. They were sloppy, though, from years of playing outlaw bikers. They encountered veterans who recalled their actual training and used synchronized military techniques. Martha says there is more talk about police bans. Rick recalled. Sincere police officers are arriving to help protect the town. Wilson's entire rotten system is coming apart. Inside the bunker, Reaper fumbled with secret data, attempting to remove years' worth of evidence. But new backups were made with every attempt at deletion. His desperate behavior was entirely anticipated and planned for. He is pursuing the bombs. Tyler, watching the bunker security feeds, issued a warning. He would, as you mentioned. Touching her wedding ring, Catherine recalled Will's final remarks regarding patience and allowing adversaries to believe they are in charge. Now, she said. Concurrently, covert systems in the bunker came online. Every surface had Will's concealed markings visible when the emergency lights changed to UV. For years, every weapon, computer, and file cabinet had been identified and monitored. How in the hell? Over their surveillance feed, Reaper's voice could be heard. When the party leader looked at his hands, he saw that they were now imprinted with invisible ink, evidence that he had been unwittingly disseminating each time he accessed his classified data. There is activity at the convoy location, Command. Rick reported immediately. Stanford's military escort is resigning and betraying the dishonest commanders. The evidence of weapons trafficking appears to have been presented to them by someone. They observed the operation's last stage through their tactical displays. Reformed MC members and federal agents were in the middle of Reaper's remaining supporters. The evil network they had established through intimidation and threats fell apart in the face of well-coordinated military accuracy. Looking through his scopes, Frank thought, 3 years. Let them believe they were in charge for 3 years. They were unaware that every action they took was recorded. All of the reactions were anticipated. Catherine took out Will's final message and opened the flag display case one last time. Arranged for all of the guns, money, and evidence that Stanford's operation involved, including all of the dishonest officials. She said, signal the task force. Describe in detail what they will discover in that bunker. All of the things that were found and that killed him. Everything is there. Tagged, monitored, and recorded. Over their intercepts, the anguished sound of Reaper's voice crackled. You're not understanding. This surpasses Stanford. Some people will not allow this to be made public. Catherine quietly answered, that's exactly what Will was counting on. Every individual who attempts to thwart us exposes another link. They provide more proof the harder they fight. They watched as government cars gathered on the industry district from the windows of the command center. As years of corruption came to an end, the sound of sirens and helicopters filled the night air. Tyler provided an update on the numerous reported surrenders. Even the staunchest supporters are resigning. They have seen the proof and come to terms with their involvement. Examining Will's tactical map, Catherine saw that every move had gone precisely as he had intended. Everything was anticipated and planned for, including the weapons shipment, the dishonest authorities, and the last-ditch effort to remove evidence. As they watched Reaper's abortive escape attempt on their monitors, she whispered, Will's last mission. He was aware that if he got too close, they would murder him. He therefore used his death as the ideal pretext and afforded us 3 years to construct a strong case. As federal officials secured the bunker, the guns, and years of evidence, the turmoil of the night started to subside. Catherine, however, was aware that this was only the start. Reaper and Stanford had not been Will's true targets. They were only the outward manifestation of a far bigger plot. Rick's voice was urgent and commanding. See what they discovered on Stanford's phone. It appears that he was reporting to a higher authority. Grinning, Catherine touched the last few pages of Will's diary. Excellent. That's precisely what we were anticipating. Are you prepared for the third phase? As Catherine examined Stanford's phone logs on the main screen of the command center, dawn bathed the sky in Ridge Creek in shades of gray. Will's covert backup procedures had been activated by the general's frantic attempts to remove evidence, which exposed years of correspondence with people well beyond his pay grade. Rick examined 3 senators as he read through the decoded communications. A deputy director at the Pentagon, as well as 2 defense contractors. This surpasses everyone's expectations. With a startled expression, Tyler rushed inside the room. "This is something you must see. I discovered it in the safe files of the bunker. CCTV footage taken on the day Mike passed away. It wasn't suicide. When he saw the whole extent of their operation, they executed him and pretended it was PTSD." When Catherine reached the last pages of Will's journal, she saw the notes he had written regarding Tyler's brother. Will was aware. That's why they collaborated and why he hired Mike. Not all they were doing was tracking weaponry. They were mapping a whole network of shadows. They observed federal officers securing the contents of the bunker through their tactical feeds. Over the course of 3 years of patient preparation, every computer, filing cabinet, and item of evidence had been meticulously tagged and recorded. Through their secret line, Frank reported that Stanford was talking more. Explains that a meeting is planned for next week. Important actors are getting together to plan the distribution of weapons in the upcoming phase. The location should be safe. Just an invitation. I'll guess. Catherine grinned glumly. The diner at Blue Ridge? How did you find out? Tyler inquired. Then comprehension came. Will picked that spot on purpose. He was aware that they would eventually require a safe location to meet. Their radios crackled with Martha's voice. There are several cars coming into town from the north. These aren't federal agents, but they have government plates. Different equipment, different protocol. Cleanup crew, Rick said. Making embarrassing evidence vanish is the responsibility of a special squad. Before we seized him, Stanford must have sent out a message. Will's last message was concealed between the folds of the flag display case, which Catherine touched. Exactly on time. Will was aware that cleaners would be sent. He planned Phase 3 for this reason. The storefront windows let them see black SUVs pulling into Ridge Creek. On their way directly to the bunker were men in outfits that virtually shouted, "Government agent deployed with practiced efficiency." One of Rick's federal agents came in immediately. "Sir. There is pressure on us from above. Directives to resign and turn over information to a special oversight body. They're not actual orders." Catherine gently answered. "Compare the list with the authentication codes." Will was ready. Although they are private contractors, they are burying the inquiry through government means. More cars were approaching from various directions, according to Frank's satellite feed. All of the Shadow Network's resources were being used in an effort to stop the damage before it became worse. Discovered another item. From the communication station, Tyler made a call. Coded communications between the director and Stanford. They're discussing shipments of weapons, but it's not just firearms. Something larger is being moved. A categorized item. Catherine gave a slow nod. That's what killed Will. He found that they were doing more than merely arming criminal organizations. They sold experimental weaponry, military secrets, and equipment capable of appending entire regions. They observed the cleanup team coordinating with local law enforcement using their surveillance network. The successor for Deputy Wilson remained steadfast in refusing to provide over evidence without the required authority. Will's meticulous preparation over the years had found allies in unlikely places. According to Rick, there are now other government agencies participating, including Homeland Security, the FBI, ATF, and formal channels. Each of them is asserting jurisdiction and requesting access to the supporting documentation. Excellent. Catherine grinned. It gets more difficult to bury the more agencies involved. Will was aware that they would attempt to hide behind bureaucracy. He dispersed the evidence across several jurisdictions for this reason. The intensity in Martha's voice was evident. "Catherine Reapers says he knows who actually gave the order to kill Will and asks to talk to you. Seeks to reach an agreement. No bargain." Frank gave stern advice. "That kind of man is cornered. He will say anything." "No," said Catherine. "This is precisely what Will foresaw. Reapers no longer tries to save himself. He is attempting to defend a higher authority. Someone who can cause him more pain than incarceration." Increased communication on encrypted channels was detected by Tyler's monitoring equipment. Several agencies worked together, yet their procedures weren't correct. Official frequencies are being used by private military contractors. A perimeter is being established. Frank examined the pattern. Standard process for containment. They'll make an effort to separate the evidence. Take charge of the story. Catherine accessed a section of Will's journal that she had never shared before. Will spent 3 years creating a new kind of network because of this. Not only federal agents and veterans, but also journalists, watchdog organizations, and online activists. The type of people who are adept at exposing hidden evidence. They observed the cleanup crew face their first challenge via their transmissions from the command center. All the computers they attempted to reach. All the files they tried to protect. Set off covert procedures that replicated the evidence on secure servers throughout the globe. Weapons are not as important as this. Tyler understood. Going over further decoded messages. They also have another product for sale. Data from tactics and intelligence. The sort of data that might jeopardize military operations. It was what Mike found. Catherine gave a quiet nod. Why they had to keep him quiet? He discovered evidence that they were betraying their own nation. Betraying all that they had pledged to defend. Rick's tone became more urgent. "This is something you must see, Catherine. There was a message on Stanford's phone just now. Just one word. Midnight. The contingency plan." The code was familiar to Frank. They will attempt to eradicate the entire town. Make an incident of some sort. Use that as a pretext to immediately destroy all of the evidence. Catherine, however, was already heading over to the tactical map. Exposing annotations that were created years ago. Check out the date he wrote. He was aware. He had a feeling they would decide to make their move tonight. How? Tyler inquired. Gazing at the accurate forecasts. How was he supposed to know? Because we will comprehend individuals such as them. Catherine clarified. Men who believe they are untouchable because of their power. Who think that by removing witnesses, they may get away with their misdeeds. They consistently adhere to the same patterns. Make the essay. Me decisions. Using their network of observation. They observed other unmarked cars pull into Ridge Creek. The network of shadows was assembling. Ready to do whatever it takes to keep its secrets safe. They're not understanding. Catherine's wedding ring was touched. Will did more than simply record their offenses. He recorded their procedures, patterns, and reactions to exposure. What they're doing at the moment. He had everything arranged. Several agencies are asking for assistance. Rick said. There will be a legitimate federal response. However, they're gone for at least 2 hours. Intentionally. With grim satisfaction, Frank nodded. Make them move quickly. Make errors. As Will had intended. For the last time, Catherine opened the flag display case. Taking out a tiny gadget Will had stashed there for years. Inform everyone. The third phase has begun. Up until now, everything we've done has been preparation. At midnight, the actual operation gets underway. As dusk drew near, the black SUVs of the cleanup staff surrounded Ridge Creek. Through feeds from the command center, Catherine observed the efficient deployment of private military contractors. Their actions revealed that they had received a great deal of special operations training. Blocking squads are being inserted on all significant routes. Frank examined their pattern. Standard procedure for isolation. Prior to their big move, they will attempt to control all movement into and out of town. There was urgency in Rick's voice as it passed over their encrypted line. "We've cracked more of Stanford's messages, Catherine." Admiral James Morrison, the deputy head of naval operations, was the director to whom he was reporting. Will was aware. Catherine opened his journal to another secret part. He picked this particular town for that reason. This very place. Morrison utilizes this property, which he owns through shell corporations, for private meetings. Tyler stormed in from his vantage point. Several chapters of MC are stepping aside and handing up evidence. However, Reaper's core gang is preparing for a major event. Combat loads and weaponry of military quality. They observed the private contractors setting up command posts via their tactical feeds. Their tools and procedures matched what Will had predicted. That's right. Specialized groups created to remove witnesses and destroy evidence. There is movement at the diner, according to Martha. Rick told. Already there, Morrison's highly skilled crew is searching for surveillance equipment. Will has deeper installations, but they are unaware of them. After taking the gadget out of the flag case, Catherine touched it. Will prepared for this moment for 3 years. Up until now, everything we have done has been to collect evidence. We reveal the complete network tonight. Additional cars were approaching from various directions, according to Frank's satellite imagery. Contractors for private security, yet they're utilizing military frequencies. An unofficial operation is being authorized by someone using government resources. Discovered something. From the communication station, Tyler made a call. Messages between Morrison and foreign accounts that were decoded. They sold more than just guns. They were offering access for sale. Schedules for military deployments, security procedures at bases, and specifics of sensitive operations. Catherine gave a somber nod. That's what killed Will. He learned that they were jeopardizing national security in order to make money. Distributing more than simply guns through the MC's distribution network. They observed Morrison's crews coordinating with the cleanup crew via their surveillance network. Although they were incredibly efficient, their skill set produced trends that Will had foreseen years before. Redirecting several federal departments. Rick said. Someone is delaying legitimate response teams by abusing high-level authority. Their goal is to purchase time so that the evidence may be cleaned up. It won't work. Catherine gave a chilly smile. Will did more than simply record their offenses. He documented their containment and cleanup processes. All of their current actions were planned and anticipated in anticipation of Martha's voice crackling through their radios. Speaking further, Catherine Reapers claims that Morrison's group intends to cause an industrial accident. Something significant enough to warrant putting the entire town under quarantine. Standard practice. Frank attested. Make a crisis. Utilize it as a front for their actual activity. However, they are unaware of our defenses. More activity on encrypted channels was picked up by Tyler's monitoring apparatus. Corrupt police units are cooperating with private contractors. They intend to visit several places at the same time. Allow them to arrive. Catherine looked over Will's strategic map. They send every team. More evidence is produced with each order they issue. Everything is being recorded by Will's systems. They watched via feeds from the command center as Morrison's advanced team experienced their first surprise. Each and every computer they used. Hidden procedures that replicated the evidence among secure servers around the world were activated by every network they attempted to hack. Additional files about Mike were discovered. As he looked over the translated messages, Tyler murmured softly. When he found out about Morrison's relationship, they killed him. Together with Will, he was assembling evidence to reveal the entire scheme. Catherine's wedding ring was touched. Will was very cautious and patient because of this. He was aware that we would only have one opportunity to reveal something so significant. The proof had to be impossible to contain. Rick's tone became more urgent. There were several high-level communications found. Morrison is requesting additional resources. Under the pretense of a training exercise, military resources are being diverted. Frank noted that they were becoming desperate. Unofficial operations are conducted through formal means. We'll urge them to do precisely that. In Ridge Creek, they observed additional contractors deploying through their surveillance network. Significant resources were being committed by the Shadow Network, resulting in an unquestionable pattern of corruption. One of Rick's federal agents said, "Sir, several agencies are putting pressure on us. Directives to resign and cede authority to a special task force. They're not actual orders." Catherine clarified. Compare these to Will's list of protocols. Although they are private contractors acting under bogus authority, they are exploiting official channels. Intercepted messages crackled on Tyler's radio. Morrison's group is talking about backup plans. If they are unable to contain the evidence, they are discussing a scorched earth protocol. They are, of course. Will's journal has another secret portion that Catherine opened. Men like these believe that having power entails never having to deal with the fallout. To defend themselves, they will set fire to everything. The military helicopters were approaching, according to Frank's satellite feed. No marks, Blackhawks. Serious assets are being deployed off the books by someone. Will had been waiting for this. Another set of secret protocols was triggered by Catherine. The more resources they invest and the larger their response, the more difficult it is to conceal their actions. They saw Ridge Creek turn into an armed camp via the windows of their command center. Checkpoints were put up by private contractors, dishonest police units worked with cleanup crews, and military resources were used without formal permission. They believe they are keeping things under control. From the flag case, Catherine touched the gadget. However, every action they take and resource they use just strengthens Will's argument. The more they attempt to conceal this, the more publicity they generate. There was resolve in Martha's voice. Our people are in place, Catherine. Everyone will enlisted is prepared, even federal agents, veterans, and law-abiding police officers. Excellent. Catherine looked at the tactical map that Will had annotated years ago with this precise situation. Because we show them what a real operation looks like at midnight. Up until now, everything was about gathering evidence. We reveal the entire fraudulent system tonight. New encrypted signals were picked up by Rick's monitoring apparatus. Morrison gave the order for his last squads to take their places. They're getting ready for a major event. Allow them to arrive. Catherine grinned icily. Will prepared for this moment for 3 years. It's time to prove to them why a SEAL's widow is not to be taken lightly. They saw Morrison's operation gain momentum through their surveillance feeds. However, each team they sent out, each directive they sent, and each asset they pledged just strengthened the evidence Will had gathered over the years. Frank looked at his watch at midnight. As Will had foreseen. They constantly believe that the gloom will keep them safe. Catherine's hand brushed Will's journal's last pages. They were never able to comprehend. Their sins are no longer concealed by the darkness. It only facilitates their tracking. As Morrison's private military contractors took their last positions surrounding Ridge Creek, the tension in the nocturnal air crackled. Catherine observed black-clad people deploying with military accuracy via monitors in the command center. Their actions demonstrated the type of training that was unavailable for purchase on the civilian market. There are 4 tactical teams coming from various angles. According to Frank, satellite feeds were used to monitor their movements. They are employing outdated special forces procedures that are no longer taught. Rick's voice traveled across their private link with urgent insight. Morrison has just touched down at the private airfield and is on the scene. Coordinating with the cleanup staff are his security details. Catherine turned to the final pages of Will's journal. 3 years ago, as he lay dying in a hospital bed, tactical notes were prepared on this very situation. Examine the deployment pattern. Just like he had predicted. They consistently used the same strategy. Tyler stormed in the door. The unexpected revelation made his face go white. I located the entire file pertaining to Mike's passing. The hit was directly ordered by Morrison. Said that Mike had learned something regarding a clandestine weapons program called Operation Shadowgate. They watched as Morrison's highly skilled squad secured the Ironwood Café using their monitoring network. Although their equipment was state-of-the-art, anyone familiar with military procedures could predict their search patterns. They're looking for surveillance equipment, according to Martha. But they're missing Will's deeper installations, the ones that were incorporated into the building structure years ago, Rick explained. New monitors came to light when Catherine turned on the gadget from the flag case. Secure servers started receiving crystal-clear intelligence from hidden cameras and microphones installed during routine maintenance and upgrades. Tyler, looking over decoded files, stated that this goes beyond the trafficking of weapons. Selling military secrets was the focus of Shadowgate. Classified technologies, base security procedures, and operation plans. For financial gain, they were jeopardizing national security. Additional assets were arriving, according to Frank's satellite images. Helicopters from the military are coming from the north. No transponders, no markings. Official resources are being used by someone without permission. Admiral Morrison is becoming frantic. Catherine observed their motions. Use military resources for a private endeavor. That was just the type of proof Will was looking for. They observed the cleanup personnel coordinating with corrupted police units through tactical feeds. They were efficient because of years of practice, but their efficiency also produced patterns that Will had thoroughly documented. Discovered another item. From the communications station, Tyler made a call. Communications between Morrison and overseas accounts that are encrypted. They sold more than American secrets. They were exposing critical intelligence and selling out our allies to compromise cooperative operations. Catherine gave a somber nod. Will was extremely patient because of this. So cautious. It wasn't only about bringing criminals to light. The goal was to safeguard national security. Their radios crackled with Martha's voice. Catherine Reapers is requesting you once more. Claims to have evidence of Will's passing. Proof that Morrison personally gave the order to strike Afghanistan. I was already aware of that. Catherine's wedding ring was touched. Prior to his death, Will figured it out. He left all of this proof for that reason. Every one of these protocols. They would try to bury everything, he knew. New encrypted signals were picked up by Rick's monitoring apparatus. Morrison is issuing final directives. They are getting ready to start their containment routine, which has to do with environmental hazards and chemical containment. Standard practice. Frank did some analysis. Make a crisis. Make use of it to defend quarantine. The ideal way to hide witnesses and evidence using command center windows. Under martial law, they observed how Ridge Creek changed. Checkpoints were established by private contractors. Unauthorized military assets were deployed, and cleanup crews were getting ready for their last mission. Redirecting several federal departments. Rick reported that someone was delaying legitimate response teams by abusing high-level authority. They're purchasing time to clean up the area. Catherine gave a chilly smile. As Will had foreseen. It gets more difficult to conceal their actions the larger the enterprise and the more money they invest. New communications were intercepted by Tyler's radio. Protocol Zero is the topic of discussion on Morrison's team. It sounds like a scenario involving burnt earth. They made a mistake. Catherine opened Will's journal to another page. They never realize that every action they take only produces more proof, and they believe that using enough violence and force will fix every problem. Morrison's men were encircling strategic points, according to Frank's tactical presentation. They are preparing for coordinated attacks, multiple teams, and simultaneous strikes. Their goal is to hit everything simultaneously. They do, of course. Catherine turned on more of Will's covert mechanisms. Men like Morrison believe that having power entails never having to deal with the fallout. They don't realize the true trap until it's too late because of this. They observed Admiral Morrison enter the diner through their surveillance network, his outfit spotless in spite of the late hour. Here he was, leading an irregular military operation, exactly the proof Will had been looking for years. One of Rick's federal agents informed me, "Sir, that other agencies are claiming jurisdiction and that we are receiving new directives. They want us to step aside and hand over authority to a designated task team." Catherine clarified that those aren't actual orders. Compare these to Will's list of protocols. Although they are private contractors acting under bogus authority, they are exploiting official channels. The intensity in Martha's voice was evident. "Our people are in place, Catherine. We're prepared to hire veterans, law-abiding police officers, and federal agents." 3 years, Frank thought as he observed the procedure. For 3 years, they believed they were in charge, not understanding that every action was recorded. Every response was anticipated. Catherine's hand brushed Will's journal's last pages. The goal was never to apprehend criminals. Showing how guys like Morrison compromise all they vowed to preserve, it was about exposing corruption at the highest levels. They watched Morrison's crew get ready for their last push via streams from the command center. However, each asset they used, directive they sent, and process they started just strengthened the evidence Will had already gathered. Tyler looked at his watch at midnight. They constantly believe that darkness will keep them safe, as Will mentioned. Catherine turned on Will's final secret systems. They were never able to comprehend. Their sins are no longer concealed by the darkness. It only facilitates their tracking. The tension in the night air increased as Morrison's plan came to a head. But while they attempted to cover up their transgressions, they were going to learn why a SEAL's last mission should never be taken lightly. The coordinated attack by Morrison's soldiers sent Ridge Creek into a state of pandemonium. Contractors in black moved with military accuracy, aiming for strategic targets Will had foreseen they would attack. However, they found their communications were being intercepted when they broke into buildings and secured crossroads. Systems that were put in place years ago tracked their movements. Frank reported from his tactical location that several units were convergent on the diner. Morrison is personally in charge of the operation. He desires that proof. Through feeds from the command center, Catherine observed the admiral coordinating his forces. His commanding presence belied his growing despair. He is still unable to comprehend. The purpose of the diner was never to conceal evidence. The goal was to force them to reveal who they really were. Tyler's voice crackled over their private channel, "Catherine. Reaper recently reached out to us and expressed his desire to work out an agreement. He has evidence." In addition to Will and Mike, Morrison also authorized hits against other investigators. They observed Morrison's cleanup crews face their first significant opposition through their surveillance network. They activated hidden protocols on each machine they accessed. The evidence spread across safe servers all over the world with each network they compromised. The Shadowgate files were located. Rick made an urgent report. It was more than just trafficking in firearms. They sold everything that could jeopardize national security, including operation plans and confidential military technologies. Morrison was exploiting international arms negotiations as a pretext for the Iron Hand MC. Catherine flipped to the last tactical graphic in Will's journal. He picked this town for that reason. Right now. This was the ideal location to reveal everything at once because of Morrison's property interests here. Military helicopters without transponders or markings were coming, according to Frank's satellite feed. Due of their desperation, they are deploying official assets without permission, which is a total violation of military protocol. Catherine triggered yet another round of Will's defenses. Men like Morrison believe that having power entails never having to deal with the fallout. As a result, they use tactical feeds to take more chances and make more blunders. As they observed the Admiral's Marines occupying strategic locations across the town, Will's covert monitoring devices continued to record every unlawful directive and every unapproved action. Several federal agencies are reacting. Rick said. People are questioning Morrison's authority. He is not succeeding in rerouting authorized response teams. There was eager intelligence in Martha's voice. They're getting ready to break into the diner, Catherine. Morrison is personally in charge of the group. They believe the primary evidence is kept there. Excellent. Catherine gave a chilly smile. We'll convince them for 3 years that everything they're doing right now is a component of his ultimate plan. New encrypted signals were picked up by Tyler's monitoring apparatus. Protocol 0 was ordered by Morrison's. They will attempt to demolish everything and use an industrial accident as a pretext. They're not understanding. Frank studied their motions. Every move they make and every procedure they start just strengthens Will's argument. They are using command center windows to record their own crimes. They saw Ridge Creek turn into a battlefield, but without the riotous gunfire or mayhem. This meticulous operation, which had been planned for years, was intended to reveal corruption at the highest levels. Respected Sir. Morrison's access to confidential military channels was reported by one of Rick's operatives. He is attempting to approve the town's complete quarantine closure. Permit him. Catherine turned on Will's last round of procedures. He produces more evidence the more government resources he abuses. The goal was never to apprehend criminals. Its purpose was to reveal the corrupting effects of power. Abruptly, Reaper's voice broke through their intercepts. Real terror took the place of his typical cockiness. You're not understanding. Morrison is not merely attempting to conceal evidence. To defend Shadowgate, he is prepared to sacrifice the entire town. Catherine calmly responded, as we know. Will was also aware of it. He prepared for this moment for 3 years because of this. They observed Morrison coordinating with his tactical troops via their surveillance network. Although the Admiral's deployments demonstrated his battle experience, his desperation made him predictable. Have you found anything else? Tyler called out from where he was standing. Selling secrets wasn't the only thing that Shadowgate was about. They were arming particular factions, attempting to sway international disputes, and profiting from both sides. Morrison's forces were shown setting up their final positions in Frank's tactical demonstration. They are getting ready to breach several places at once. Typical military procedure for exploiting sensitive sites. Because they continue to believe that physical proof is involved. Catherine's wedding ring was touched. They were never able to comprehend. Will did more than simply record their offenses. He recorded every aspect of their fraudulent system. Through their safe conduit, Martha's voice transmitted resolve. Our guys are prepared. Federal agents, law-abiding officers, and veterans. Every person we recruit is aware of their role. 3 years, Rick thought as he observed the procedure. They were allowed to believe they were in charge for 3 years without realizing that every action was being recorded. Every response was anticipated. When Catherine turned the last pages of Will's journal, she saw his final plan. The goal was never to apprehend criminals. The goal was to show how guys like Morrison violate the things they vowed to defend. They watched the Admiral's men get ready for their last assault via broadcasts from the command center. However, each team they sent out, each directive they sent, and each process they started just strengthened the evidence Will had gathered. They are beginning. As the night sky was illuminated by explosions, Tyler reported. Morrison's squad were attempting to divert attention from their true goals by generating distractions. However, Catherine was already triggering Will's final defenses. Allow them to arrive. Now, everything they do only strengthens Will's argument. Allowing corruption to manifest itself is sometimes the greatest way to expose it. As Morrison's operation came to a head, the sound of tactical teams and helicopters filled the night air. But while they attempted to cover up their transgressions, they were going to learn why a SEAL's last mission should never be taken lightly. Catherine's voice carried the strength Will had always saw in her execute final phase, commanding all troops. Make sure they see what true patriots look like. The night sky over Ridge Creek was filled with explosions. Morrison's forces simultaneously broke into many areas. But more of Will's covert procedures were activated with every explosion and well-planned attack. After 3 years of planning, the little village was turned into an intelligence collection operation that recorded every unlawful directive and every unapproved action. Frank reported via their secret connection that several squads were entering the diner. Morrison is personally in charge of the main attack, but they are falling into Will's trap. Through feeds from the command center, Catherine observed the Admiral's forces moving with a lack of practice. Even though they had received great training, their professionalism produced patterns that Will had already seen years before. Rick's voice was urgent, "Sir. Military satellites are being accessed by Morrison. In order to avoid any outside observation, he is attempting to create a no-fly zone over Ridge Creek." Excellent. Catherine triggered yet another round of Will's defenses. He is conducting an unlawful operation with official military assets. Through their surveillance network, we were able to obtain precisely that type of evidence. They observed as the Admiral worked with his tactical teams to coordinate. Every action they took was being captured on camera. Systems Will had put in place during the years of meticulous preparation intercepted every message. The whole Shadow Gate files were located. Tyler reported from his post. They sold more than just guns. They were using the Iron Hand MC as a front for global arms sales, inciting wars for financial gain, and controlling conflicts all across the world. Their radios crackled with Martha's voice. Speaking to his remaining men is Catherine Reapers. He's explaining everything to them, including how Morrison took advantage of them and how the MC joined something greater than they could have ever imagined. Will had prepared tactical notes on this same situation, which Catherine discovered when she opened his journal. He initially hired Reaper for that reason. Knew that the man's greed would eventually be subdued by his conscience. More military assets were approaching Blackhawks coming in low, without transponders, according to Frank's satellite feed. Because Morrison is desperate, they are attempting to add more teams covertly. Catherine studied their motions. He believes that everything will vanish if he can only manage the story and secure the facts. He and other men always assume that control equates to power. They observe the Admiral's forces face their first actual opposition through tactical feeds. Every system they entered and every machine they compromised multiplied the evidence on safe servers all over the world. Rick noted that several federal agencies are currently reacting. At the highest levels, Morrison's authority is being questioned. He is not succeeding in rerouting authorized response teams. New encrypted signals were picked up by Tyler's monitoring apparatus. They're starting a scorched earth protocol of some sort. Morrison has given his teams the command to demolish everything. Make up a terrorist-related cover narrative. Give it a shot. Catherine gave a chilly smile. Will convince them that erasing evidence was feasible for 3 years. They were never able to comprehend. Now, whatever they do only strengthens his argument. They saw Ridge Creek become into a battlefield of patience and accuracy through the windows of their command center. There was no turmoil here. The purpose of the meticulously planned operation was to reveal corruption at the top echelons of military leadership. Through their encrypted line came the voice of Catherine Reaper. Morrison's group is getting ready to break into the basement of the eatery. They believe you're storing Will's evidence there, but isn't that incorrect? Physical evidence was never the point of this. You get it now. Catherine's wedding ring was touched. They would try to bury everything, Will knew. For this reason, he devoted 3 years to recording their procedures, patterns, and whole fraudulent system. Morrison's forces were seen setting up defensive positions at strategic points in Frank's tactical display. As Will anticipated, they are exploiting sensitive sites in accordance with conventional military procedure. Catherine turned on more of Will's systems because they are experts with training. They are predictable because of their training. Every protocol they start and every process they adhere to just contributes to our documentation. There was new intelligence in Martha's voice. Morrison is now in the diner. He is attempting to authorize some sort of emergency response plan by using secure military communications. Tyler called from the communication station and said he had found it. He is attempting to fabricate a story about chemical weapons in order to defend the town's complete quarantine, which is common military practice for handling delicate situations. On encrypted lines, Rick's monitoring device picked up more talk. Morrison's authority is currently being questioned by several authorities. His attempts to exert authority are not working. They watched the Admiral plan his last attack via their surveillance system. However, each team he sent, each directive he sent, and each asset he committed further strengthened Will's position. Legitimate federal response teams are 30 minutes away, sir, according to one of Rick's agents. Morrison's time is running short. Observing the Admiral's increasingly desperate actions, Catherine pointed out that they were also making mistakes. Will anticipated that they would. Men like Morrison are unable to cope with losing control because they are so accustomed to having it. It was the first time that Reaper's voice carried genuine comprehension. Everything, the meal, the proof, the whole thing. Catching us was never the goal, was it? Will exposed something larger by using us. Catherine confirmed that he took advantage of your predictability. Your habits, your procedures, your conviction that having power entails never having to deal with the fallout. Your current actions are all a component of his last mission. They followed the unfolding of Morrison's operation via streams from the command center. His tactical squads continued to be effective and professional, but their very effectiveness was recording crimes that were no longer covert. Tyler provided an update on the numerous reported surrenders. Morrison's contractors are beginning to understand their true role. Instead of facing federal charges, they are stepping down. According to Frank's satellite vision, actual Army units were arriving from the side. At last, a Pentagon official inquired as to why unapproved resources were being used if Will's evidence was getting to the proper people. Catherine ran her hand over the last few pages of his diary. Everything that is taking place right now is precisely what he anticipated. Allowing corruption to manifest itself is sometimes the greatest way to expose it. As Morrison's plan came to a head, the night air was filled with the sound of tactical teams and helicopters. However, in their attempt to hide their misdeeds, they had fallen into the trap that Will Ellison had been building for 3 years. All units, Catherine said with a tone of unwavering assurance. Complete the last step. Prove to them what true patriots stand for. Admiral Morrison's meticulously planned world fell apart around him as he stood in the main room of the Ironwood Café, surrounded by tactical teams. As Will had anticipated, every attempt to control the situation backfired, and Catherine watched through command center cameras as the military leader's calm broke. Rick reported over their secure line that several federal agencies had breached the boundary. The contractors for Morrison are stepping aside. They are aware that they are being charged by the federal government for conducting unapproved military actions. In his tactical display, Frank depicted the Admiral's soldiers dispersing. His teams are becoming less cohesive and breaking formation. They are now aware that they are involved in an illegal activity. Morrison had an urgent report from one of his contractors, "Sir. Military channels are no longer available to us. Our authorization is being questioned by someone at the Pentagon level." Catherine turned on Will's last round of procedures. Observing the complete activation of hidden systems over Ridge Creek. After 3 years of monitoring, every unlawful order and unauthorized action started to be streamed to secure servers across the globe. The full Shadowgate files were located. Tyler called out from where he was standing. Morrison sold more than just firearms. He was inciting wars, appending areas, and then making money on both sides. One component of a worldwide operation was the Iron Hand MC. They observed the Admiral's attempt to regain control via their surveillance network. But each directive he issued and piece of equipment he used just strengthened the evidence Will had gathered over the years. Reaper's voice entered their encrypted channel, "Catherine." Morrison gave his other squads instructions to start Procedure Zero. They will attempt to demolish everything and use an industrial accident as a pretext. Give it a shot. Catherine's wedding ring was touched. Will was aware that they would try something similar. He therefore worked for 3 years to ensure that no evidence could be genuinely deleted. There was eager intelligence in Martha's voice. Morrison is using the diner's office to access classified channels. He is attempting to approve a military emergency reaction of some sort. Frank analyzed since he still believes this to be about tangible evidence. He's not getting it. Will did more than simply record their offenses. He recorded every aspect of their fraudulent system. They observed the Admiral coordinating with his remaining faithful troops via tactical streams. However, his expertise, training, and adherence to protocols only served to increase his predictability. According to Rick, several surrenders were verified. The gravity of their predicament is becoming apparent to Morrison's contractors. Instead of being charged with treason, they are opting for federal imprisonment. New encrypted signals were picked up by Tyler's monitoring apparatus. All of Morrison's avenues are being blocked as he tries to get in touch with a higher authority who he believes can still protect him. They are, of course. Catherine gave a chilly smile. Will was aware that they would eventually attempt to solicit favors. For this reason, he spent years recording every relationship, dishonest official, and compromised channel. They saw Ridge Creek change from a battlefield to a monument to Will's strategic acumen through the windows of the command center. There was no turmoil here. It was the methodical implementation of a 3-year-old plan. One of Rick's operatives reported, "Sir. 10 minutes out are legitimate military reaction units. Morrison is making mistakes and running out of choices." As Catherine observed, the Admiral's increasingly desperate actions made it clear that they would target men like Morrison. They have no idea how to deal with losing control. There was fresh insight in Reaper's voice. Everything about this operation will be planned. It was more than just bringing atrocities to light. It was intended to demonstrate how guys like Morrison undermine what they pretend to defend and how power corrupts. Frank's satellite footage revealed actual army personnel assuming control and law enforcement forming a cordon. Their monitoring feeds have now totally compromised Morrison's illegal business. They saw the Admiral's final efforts to limit the damage fail. Every process he sought to start and every system he tried to access just served to further document his crimes. Catherine Tyler made an urgent report. "This is Morrison's last play. He is giving his remaining troops orders to break into the basement of the diner. They believe the primary evidence is kept there." Excellent. Catherine triggered Will's final defenses. Now, everything they do only strengthens Will's argument. Allowing corruption to manifest itself is sometimes the greatest way to expose it. Their radios crackled with Martha's voice. Morrison is now going into the basement. Desperate, he demands that his own men discover anything that can be destroyed and threatens them. Frank analyzed since he still didn't comprehend. The actual evidence will never be concealed. He concealed it in their own procedures, methods, and attempts to hide their crimes. They witnessed the last seconds of Morrison's escape via broadcasts from the command center. Still thinking he could somehow control the situation, the admiral stood in the basement of the cafe, surrounded by the remains of his empire. Even after all these years, there was still real regret in Reaper's voice. We believed that we were only operating weapons and earning money. We were unaware that we were a part of something greater, something that violated all of the principles we had previously stood for. Touching the pages that had led them to this point, Catherine opened Will's journal one final time. Will made this decision for that reason. He was aware that unless men like Morrison were fully exposed, they would never stop. Their entire crooked system was exposed. According to Rick, there are currently several federal agencies present. Morrison is being encircled. The Joint Chiefs have formally withdrawn his authority. They observed the Admiral's last moments of realization via their tactical network. A SEAL who had seen the truth, even in death, had documented and exposed all he had constructed, every crooked agreement, and every transgression of his pledge. One of Morrison's final devoted contractors reported, "Sir, we are totally encircled. Authorized military units and federal agents. There's no escape." Catherine, looking via Will's strategically positioned cameras, whispered quietly, "There never was. This was where it was always going to end, just like Will had intended." For some guys, having power entails never having to deal with the fallout. Will devoted his final years to disproving them. Across the main floor of the Ironwood Café, Admiral Morrison turned to face Catherine Ellison. As military police and federal officials secured the building, his admiral stars reflected the emergency lights. At last, the once dominant military leader's calmness had given way, exposing the desperate man hiding behind the uniform. "You don't know what you did." Morrison's tone was one of fear and menace. "My co-workers won't allow themselves to be exposed by this. If necessary, they will bury everything, including this entire town. Here's where you're mistaken." For the final time, Catherine opened Will's journal. "Will was fully aware of your employer. That's why he documented everything for 3 years. Not just your transgressions, but the whole crooked system. Every relationship, every reward, every breach of your oath." They watched as further government teams secured the town via broadcasts from the command center. One by one, Morrison's private contractors turned themselves in, preferring federal detention to treason charges. Rick reported over their secret channel, "Sir, you can access the Pentagon Oversight Committee online. They are verifying all of this. Shadowgate, the trafficking of weapons, and the commercial exploitation of international wars. Will's proof is infallible." Tyler's tone was one of contentment. Morrison's secret servers were just discovered. Comprehensive records of every transaction they made, corrupt official they purchased, every operation they carried out under the guise of the Iron Hand MC, since Will was aware that they would maintain records. From his tactical stance, Frank conducted an analysis. Because they believe their power makes them untouchable, men like Morrison document everything. They witnessed the final attempts at resistance by the Admiral fall apart through their surveillance network. All the systems he attempted to access were compromised. All escape routes are closed. Every backup plan was made public. You're still not getting it. Morrison gave Catherine a growl. "I was doing something bigger. Working covertly and doing what weak men label wrong can occasionally be necessary to preserve American dominance." When the former MC leader, now dressed in federal tactical gear, walked in, Reaper's speech broke the tense atmosphere. "Everything that uniform represents was betrayed by you. Veterans like us who merely wanted to fit in were used men who became criminals. Will realize the reality. You don't have patriotism. You are traitors." Through their safe route, Martha's voice delivered fresh intelligence. "The weapons stockpile has been secured by authorized military units, Catherine. It's all documented. Will's records of missing military equipment include serial numbers that match. Catherine touched her wedding band 3 years ago. After making you believe you had one for 3 years, the threat had been eliminated with Will's death. However, you were never aware of the type of man you were interacting with. They observed the last elements of Will's plan come together through tactical feeds. Everything required to reveal the full Shadowgate conspiracy was retrieved by federal agents, including documents, hard drives, and communication logs. Tyler reported immediately that he had found something else. Records pertaining to other investigators who approached too closely. Dozens of them, not just Will and my brother, were staged to appear as suicides or accidents. The first genuine terror appeared on Morrison's face. Those files were encrypted and safeguarded. How did you? Will provided for all of our needs. Catherine gave a chilly smile. Every pattern you adhere to, every security standard, and every password. He documented how men like you think and respond to being cornered during his final years. More real military units were arriving, according to Frank's satellite reports. Direct supervision has been approved by Joint Chiefs. Investigations are underway into Morrison's whole chain of command. They watched from the windows of their command center as Ridge Creek changed from a battleground to a monument to one man's commitment to the truth. Exposing criminals was not the only goal of Will's last assignment. The goal was to demonstrate that corruption could never be fully concealed. As federal authorities moved to arrest Morrison, Rick declared, "It's over." The Pentagon has confirmed many high-level arrests. Shadowgate is fully revealed. This is unacceptable. Morrison's words echoed around the diner, frantic. This level of operation cannot be revealed. The system will not permit it. That's where you're mistaken once more. Catherine triggered Will's last command. The system is more than merely dishonest public servants and covert transactions. Additionally, it consists of sincere patriots, committed agents, and honest troops who uphold their oaths. When they obtained indisputable evidence, Will knew they would take action. With a true understanding in place of his previous haughtiness, Reaper went up to the Admiral. "We had rules, were once soldiers, and had faith in a greater power than ourselves. It's never too late to recall who we're meant to be," as Will reminded me. They watched as FBI teams retrieved additional evidence from the bunker via surveillance feeds. Every document, file, and bit of evidence that Will had painstakingly gathered revealed corruption in a way that was no longer concealable. Tyler discovered Will's last tape and called Catherine from his position. The one he wrote while in the hospital, detailing what he had learned about Shadowgate. "Play it," she said quietly. Despite his deteriorating health, Will's voice reverberated throughout the diner as he detailed the entire scheme he had discovered. Morrison's expression changed to one of total despair when he saw how thorough Will's investigation was. 3 years, Frank thought as he saw the Admiral being led away by federal officers. 3 years of tolerance, evidence collection, and allowing them to believe they were safe. Will's most memorable assignment may have been his final one. Through their radios came the satisfaction of Martha's voice. "The town is safe. Federal teams are recovering everything with the assistance of honest police units. The entire network of Morrison is made public. They observed the full demolition of Shadowgate via their tactical network. All instances of dishonest officials, illicit activities, and betrayals of confidence were documented and made public." Will was aware that this would occur. Catherine ran her hand over the last few pages of his diary. Knew that because they were so accustomed to having control, guys like Morrison would not recognize the true danger until it was too late. Allowing corruption to reveal itself is sometimes the greatest strategy to combat it. Reaper walked over to Catherine, his eyes full of respect. Will was correct in every way. Concerning Morrison, Shadowgate, and the corrupting effects of power. Some of us just lost sight of our goals. That's why he made this decision, Catherine said quietly. Not only to reveal wrongdoing, but also to serve as a reminder to others like you that it's never too late to uphold your honor. As federal teams secured Ridge Creek, the sound of justice flooded the night air. Arrests and revealed schemes, however, did not represent the true win. It was in demonstrating that even at the highest echelons of corruption, one man's commitment to the truth might triumph. Will has finished his last mission. As the final piece of evidence was gathered, Rick reported. He didn't work for nothing and didn't sacrifice anything for nothing. Catherine felt the strength Will had always seen in her as she touched the flag display case one last time. No, she said quietly. It wasn't for nothing. Fighting corruption isn't always the biggest win. It's in demonstrating how the truth always finds a way. Catherine Ellison was sitting in her normal table at the Ironwood Café when dawn dawned over Ridge Creek. In front of her, Will's journal opened. Long shadows were cast across a diner that now represented something far more than a mere meeting spot as the early sun shone through the freshly fixed windows. Coffee? As she had done every morning for the last 3 years, Martha came over with a fresh pot. Her actions, however, were now characterized by pride rather than cautious attention to detail. Regards, Martha. Touching the flag display case next to her, Catherine grinned. Without all of the federal agents, everything appears to be calm. She saw the normalcy return to Ridge Creek through the windows of the diner. Will had spent years collecting the last bits of evidence, and yesterday the last government cars had left. Investigations at the highest levels of military leadership had been prompted by Morrison's detention. I found something worth seeing. Tyler came in holding a document with military seals on it. A formal evaluation of Mike's case. They are clearing his name and admitting that he was killed for finding Shadowgate. Like Will, he died a hero. Catherine read the final entry in Will's journal, which had been penned just hours before he passed away. He was aware that this day would arrive. Knew that even at the greatest echelons of corruption, truth would triumph. Rick's speech flowed through their safe conduit with joy. The initial findings of the Pentagon Oversight Committee were just made public. Shadowgate is fully revealed. Dozens more are being investigated, while 32 top military officers have been jailed. Frank slid into the booth and joined them, since Will did more than just record crimes. He recorded all of the corruption's procedures, routines, and system. Provided us with what we required to destroy it all. They saw Reaper enter via the front door of the diner, dressed in a federal witness outfit instead of the MC colors. His evidence had been essential in revealing Morrison's entire scheme. Reaper joined their table and said, I still feel strange, being in the appropriate position once more. Didn't Will know? I was aware that some of us simply required a reminder of our true selves. Tom came out of the kitchen and Martha brought more coffee. For the past 3 years, the couple has been playing their parts well and displaying their military demeanor in public. With pride in his voice, Tom noted that the town had changed. People talk more freely and stand taller. Will's light was brighter than the extended darkness of Morrison's corruption. They observed Ridge Creek's healing using their tactical network, which is presently only utilized to track the town's recuperation. Businesses in the area reopened fearlessly. Veterans marched with newfound dignity, and honorable police officers regained their power. Most recent information from Washington. Rick used their channel to report. Shadowgate official hearings are being held by Congress. Beyond our wildest expectations, Will's proof revealed corruption. Recalling Will's final remarks about patience and letting the truth find its own way, Catherine caressed her wedding ring. The wicked never comprehend what he understood. Control is not what power is. It's about accountability. In order to clear his brother's name, Tyler distributed the formal paperwork. In every way, Will and Mike were correct. About Shadowgate, about Morrison, and about the corruption that occurs while no one is looking. Frank stated, drawing on his experience as a ranger, that's why Will made this decision. Not just to reveal wrongdoers, but also to serve as a reminder that when decent individuals band together, corruption can never be fully concealed. They saw more motorcycles coming through the windows of the diner, but these riders were different. Reformed members of MC are currently exposing additional criminal networks in collaboration with federal agencies. Returning to honor by assisting other veterans. Additional proof was discovered in the bunker files. Quietly, Reaper reported. Other corrupt officials believe they are untouchable, and there have been operations such as Shadowgate. They could all be exposed by Will's tactics. They will, too. Catherine opened the journal to another section. Will left us all we needed. Not merely proof, but a comprehensive plan for combating corruption. It's not the end of his mission. It's only the beginning. As the morning crowd started to come, Martha brought new coffee. Federal officials wrapping up their investigations mixed with regular consumers. They were all attracted to a diner that had come to represent opposition to corruption. The town council is formally announcing it. With pride, Tom declared. The diner is being designated as a historic property. Where power was subdued by truth. The plaque will read that. They received more information from Washington through their secure connections. Morrison's links to other corrupt networks had come to light during his interrogation. Others who had violated their oaths as officials. They studied Will's approaches. His tactics were used by organizations tasked with combating corruption. It's not simply about winning. Reaper watched as the town sprang to life. Remembering who we are meant to be is the key. Will knew that. I was aware that truth is sometimes used in combat rather than weaponry. For the last time, Catherine touched the flag display case. Sensed the power Will had always admired in her. He also has other knowledge. That corruption relies on people's sense of powerlessness. Feeling isolated. But when we stand for the truth, we're never alone. With strategic eyes that now saw promise rather than danger, Frank surveyed the early site. Will's legacy goes beyond simply bringing Shadowgate to light. It's about demonstrating that a single person's commitment to the truth can triumph against any degree of corruption. More folks came through the doors of the diner. Local residents, federal agents, and veterans. Every member of the network Will had established. Each had a unique tale of how his last assignment had impacted their lives. Restored their belief in the rule of law. Rick relayed the latest from the Pentagon. On the basis of Will's evidence, they are putting new oversight procedures into place. Ensuring that Shadowgate won't occur again. Touching the papers that cleared his brother's identity, Tyler grinned. Mike would be pleased. Not only was he proven correct, but his passing also contributed to the truth's revelation. The same as Will's. As Catherine wrote her last entry in Will's journal, the morning sun rose higher above Ridge Creek. It's a continuation rather than an end. A pledge that he will continue to tackle corruption. There would always be champions for that truth. Will, you were correct. Softly, she whispered. Directly combating corruption isn't always the best way to win. It is to demonstrate to others that it is always worthwhile to stand up for what is right. As Ridge Creek embraced its new identity, the sounds of camaraderie permeated the Ironwood Café. Not only was it a small community that had fought corruption, but it also served as a reminder that when good people banded together, justice could triumph over even the most powerful institutions. Even though Will Ellison's mission was ended, his legacy endured in everyone who opted for justice over fear, honor over corruption, and truth over power. Truth would eventually make its way into the light, as demonstrated by the occasions when one man's sacrifice might illuminate the path for others to follow. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you liked this one. Simply click to view, and remember to subscribe. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.